Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Talk the Ting. This evening, thank you for joining us this evening. Right now, you guys can start to go ahead and share the live. This evening, we're going to be speaking about Social Security in Dominica. We're going to be speaking about the Dominica Social Security. And our guest tonight is somebody who has a wealth of experience with Social Security in Dominica. We have Mr. Augustus Etienne, who is the Deputy Director of the Dominica Social Security. So that's going to be our guest for this evening. We invite your questions in the comment section. We already have a host of what we plan to ask him and discuss. So hopefully the questions that we don't see we'll get to. Good evening, Mr. Etienne.
Good evening, Mr. Wallace and Mr. George. Good evening to all your viewers and participants.
How are you doing tonight?
I've had a long day, but that's normal. That's usual for me.
Long day, making it even a little longer for you.
Good evening, Mr. Wallace and Mr. George. Good evening to all.
We're just gonna give people some time to share the live links.
Okay.
I'm doing that myself, you know. Like they say.
How was the weather today in the city state?
Very, very beautiful day we had compared to the last couple of days.
Okay.
Sunny throughout.
I wish we could say the same. It's very,
Although sometimes when I'm in the office, I don't get to see what happens outside there. I come in the morning and I leave in the night. So
you need a office in the corner, office facing the bayfront, the big window for a big window.
Well, my office doesn't have that thing now, so but I don't mind.
So Mr. Etienne, tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us a little background on yourself. You know, where you're from, where you originally hail from. What is good to say?
Oh Lord, that's a difficult question, you know. I like to describe myself as a true Dominican because I have links in so many different communities. I was brought up in the small community of Dubic in Granby. I went to primary school there. Then when I started going to high school in 1979, the same year of Hurricane David, I moved from Dubic to live with my father in Soufriere because my father at the time was the one that was carrying school children up and down from Soufriere to Roseau. And it was an easy thing for me to fit with my family there so as to be able to get to and from school with my father. Then after about 3 years at high school, I moved to join my siblings on my mother's side who were living in Mahu because, again, we're trying to get to an easier commute to and from school. And it was easier for me to do that from Mahu than from Dubic itself or even from Soufriere. So I have spent the greater part of my life in the community of Mahu. I'm now settled in the neighborhood community of Timid. That's where I built my house and that's where I have my family. I have been working with the Dominica Social Security now for almost 34 years. I started in 1987 in a supervisory capacity within the accounts department of the Social Security. And by 1989, I left for a 3-year period to go to the US to pursue a degree in business administration with an accounting concentration. When I came back to Dominica in 1992, I joined the Social Security again. In fact, the director of the Social Security at the time I left was so impressed with my that he kind of negotiated with government to secure my services upon my return to Dominica because I went to study in the US under government scholarship that was provided at the time by the US Presidential Caribbean Basin Initiative in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And since I came back to Social Security, I've served in different capacities. I served as internal auditor, I served as chief financial officer. And from 2007, I have been in the position of deputy director. You can call me the second in command at the institution. And in many respects, I represent the face and the voice of Social Security because part of my substantive duties is to deal with the public relations aspect of Social Security, to interface with the public, to provide information, to respond to queries, to provide clarification and things like that. The other person who does that is the executive director. So many times you would see us or hear us together on the radio, on the television programs, and so on. And when we do outreach activities to schools and community groups, the other management staff double up to assist. But basically, that the responsibility is that of the director and the deputy director.
So this interview is basically right up your alley.
Oh Lord, apparently it is, yes.
So what is the Dominica Social Security? How old is the Social Security? When did the Social Security start in Dominica?
Okay. Just last month, on the 1st of February, we celebrated the 45th anniversary of the establishment of Social Security in Dominica. So it started on 1st February 1976, and it took over from what was then known as the National Provident Fund of Dominica. And that Provident Fund had been in existence for a mere 5 years prior to the establishment of Social Security. And what the Provident Fund did was to allow working people to make a contribution to the fund, and they would be entitled to receive a lump sum payment either upon retirement or upon them becoming disabled, whichever event happens first. So if you retired from work before, you would be entitled to a retirement grant, a lump sum payment. Or if you became disabled before retiring, you would be entitled to a disablement grant. And what was realized then was that the lump sum payment, the grant that persons received, was not truly adequate to take care of them in their twilight years, because when you get a lump sum of money, you work it out quickly, you get work for it to do quickly, and in no time it is finished. And for the rest of your life, you had nothing to look forward to, nothing to depend on. So it was felt necessary to replace the Provident Fund with the Social Security program, which was a more comprehensive program that offered a wider range of benefits, but importantly, that offers persons a pension in retirement, a pension being a periodic payment from the time they retire for the remainder of their lives. And something coming in every week, every fortnight, every month is certainly better for someone to receive and look forward to, rather than getting a lump sum, no matter how large the lump sum may be. As I said, the lump sum would be frittered away in quick time, and the person has nothing else to depend on. So Social Security, well, we say it is a program of national insurance or social insurance. It is not unlike other insurances, meaning that you make payments to the program in advance of things happening, so that if and when things happen, you have a means of getting income. You will be compensated to kind of allow you to maintain your normal existence or to restore you to where you were before that event happened. So as a program of national insurance, it operates on a principle we refer to as pooling, P-O-O-L-I-N-G, pooling of resources, bringing together the contributions that we collect from the thousands of persons who are contributing. And from that pool, we share risks, meaning that those persons who make those contributions, when their ability to work and earn their income is affected by certain risks, certain things that can happen to them in their life, illness, pregnancy, accidental injury on the job, disability, when they become, well, not too old, but when they attain a particular age or when they die, at those moments, they will not be able to work and earn income, and therefore the system provides them with a source of income. So we provide income, we provide coverage as it is to three categories of persons: employees, people who work for other people, myself, people who work for the government of Dominica, people who work for the Astafans, the witch churches, courts, and all of those places there. We also have people who work for themselves. We refer to them as self-employed persons: bus drivers, tailors, seamstresses, vendors, barbers, just name it. These people, they work for themselves, they determine the terms and conditions of their work. They're not accountable or answerable to anybody. They are self-employed persons. And we cover a third category of persons who we refer to as voluntary contributors. These are persons who are neither employees of other people or self-employed persons, but persons who have both the means, the resources to pay contributions, and who have the desire to provide themselves with that protection on a voluntary basis. So under the law, they're not mandated to do it, as are employees and self-employed persons. But those persons choose to do it because they want to have access to benefits at the end of their working life. And that voluntary program is especially attractive, useful, beneficial to Dominicans who live in the diaspora, particularly where they are undocumented, where they are illegitimate, they're not regularized. So you have people who go to the US on vacation and they like the place, they like the life, they overstay their welcome. And they are working, probably making good money, but because they are not legit in the place, they cannot participate freely in the labor force and cannot make contributions to the system. So it will be useful if they intend at some point in their life to return to Dominica, to register and pay those contributions to Dominica so that later on they can access a pension.
So you said about that was one of my questions, right? Is it mandatory? So out of the three categories you mentioned, only the voluntary category is mandatory.
Is not mandatory.
Not mandatory, right?
No.
So
under the law, anybody between the age of 16 and the pensionable age, which is now 65, who is engaged in work for pay, is supposed to be registered with and paying contributions to the Social Security system. Some people opt not to, some people try all kinds of ways not to, but we have powers under the law to be able to persecute them in court to get them to do what they're supposed to do.
So are contributions is that the responsibility of the employer or the employee?
Well, for those who work for employers, the law holds the employer as an agent. So the employer ought to deduct contributions from the salaries and wages of the employees and to pay those contributions along with their portion on behalf of the employees into the Social Security system. In the case of self-employed persons, they are responsible for making sure that they pay their contributions themselves, and voluntary contributors are required to do the same.
So how is that? I mean, I'm just curious. How is that vetted though? So for a self-employed person, how do you guys know that they are paying their correct contributions? I mean,
okay, in the case of self-employed persons, many self-employed persons operate in a haphazard way. They do not keep adequate and proper records. So when they come to us, we have to interview them, and through a process of interview, we determine what their income is. They will tell you, on a good week, in a good day, in a good month, I make so much. And they say on average, give and take, sometimes it's up, sometimes it's low. On average, you would make so much a year. And they say, okay, yes, $1,000 a month for 12,000 a year, what as the case may be. And then you apply our contributions are a percentage of people's earnings, whatever people's earnings are.
What are those percentages?
Huh?
Sorry to cut you, but what are those percentages?
I will speak to that. In the case of the employees, this year employers are deducting 6.25% from the employee's wage, whatever your wages are. And we take contributions on earnings of up to $7,000 per month. So, but you're earning between $1 and $7,000, you pay 6.25% of whatever that is. If you earn in excess of $7,000, they only deduct that 6.25% of $7,000, not on the amount in excess of $7,000. Self-employed persons, voluntary contributors, also pay on the maximum of $7,000 per month. So the employer has to deduct 6.25% from the employee's pay, and the employer has to match that with another 7.25% and pay the total of 13.5% into Social Security on behalf of the employee. The self-employed persons are contributing this year 12.5% of the earnings that they declare to us. And the voluntary contributors this year are contributing 11.15% of the earnings that they declare to us.
So, but good question though. In terms of you say declare to us, declare to the Social Security or declare to the tax.
Yeah, good question. People. Very good question. Well, we deal with them with those as they come to us, but sometimes they declare one thing to us and they declare something different to Inland Revenue. And sometimes we have to share information between Inland Revenue and Social Security to ensure that people are declaring the correct earnings. But you will appreciate that most people will try to pay as little contribution as possible, and invariably they end up declaring very small income. But by the same token, they will end up receiving very small benefits because the benefit is a function of your earnings. So you pay contributions on small earnings, you will benefit on small earnings. Because you pay contributions as a percentage of your earnings, we pay you benefit as a percentage of the same earnings on which you pay contributions.
So I imagine
yes, go ahead.
Contributions are not something that, they stay the same for 10, 20 years. They would adjust. And recently there was I think the government had a staggered 3-year increase in contributions. Was that like a social security policy or something joint?
Social Security contribution is slated to increase by 0.25% over a 20-year period. That started in 2012 and is going to continue until the year 2031. What it is, the system has to be the system is expected to exist in perpetuity, indefinitely, until the last surviving contributor receives his or her share of benefits from the system. So with everything that's happening with nowadays, people are living longer, and every 3 years, the system, the Social Security Fund, has to undergo an actuarial evaluation. An actuary is somebody who is an expert in statistics, who assesses risks and determines premiums adequate to cover those risks. So every 3 years, that person comes and looks at the Social Security Fund, what is happening with the fund, how many people are working and contributing, how many people are currently receiving pension, what is the age profile of the pensioners, how many children are being born, at what rate people are dying, all of those demographic things. And the indications on the ground are that people are living longer, and people always take us to task when we say that, because young people are dying. You hear people in their 40s, in their whatever, dying. That is true. But the system is not just there for the young people. Those who are reach pensionable age, in their 60s, they go on to 90. We are in fact paying now Mr. Heskif Kazimi, you know, the former bandmaster of the Music Lovers Government Band. He's turning 103 this year. And we've been paying him contributions for 43 years of his life. The system is 45 years, 43 years of those 45 years. Because once you qualify, when you get there, the system has to continue paying you forever and ever until you die. And even after you die, if you leave dependents behind, your dependents have to continue to be paid.
Mr. Etienne, some people might argue that one of the factors that actuaries don't take into consideration are factors such as natural disasters, Hurricane Maria, COVID, and also factors such as, you know, has salaries generally, you know, increased in the country that the Social Security serves. So if those things don't move along with the projected or the planned increases of Social Security, at some point, you know, there may be an issue.
Okay, so I haven't spoken about the rates that we should be benefits, but the contributions that we collect from all the contributors, employees, self-employed, and voluntary contributors, constitute the main source of income into Social Security. And those contributions have to do 3 things: to pay benefits to current people who qualify for benefit currently, because they paid their contribution, they're in a situation now where they need to be paid; to meet the cost of administration, because you have to pay our salaries, you have to pay electricity, water, telephone, everything that's necessary to operate a business. And any surplus that you do not need now for either benefits and or to meet the cost of administration, you have to invest to earn returns so that you can plow those returns back into the fund, so the fund can continue to be replenished and to continue to revolve, as it were, forever and ever and ever. So there has to be some level of balance, some level of equilibrium between what comes in and what goes out. But we are collecting contributions at a much lower rate than the rate at which we pay out benefits, because we pay short-term benefits, sickness, maternity, employment injury at the rate of 60% of someone's earnings. And we're collecting contributions at 13.5% currently. We pay pensions at between 30 and 60% of a person's income when they retire. The actual percentage they will receive will depend on how long they would have contributed for. You get 30% after 10 years contributions, and that 30% is increased for every year above the initial 10 years, and that can go up to 60%. So there needs to be some level of equilibrium balance between what comes and what goes out. So the increase in the contribution rate is meant to narrow, as it were, close in on the financing gap, because we're taking in at 13.5 and we're paying at 60%. And the actual cost of the full package of benefits we offer is, I think, 23.5% of people's earnings, and we are taking only 13.5. So we are 10 percentage points below the actual cost of the package that we offer. And you cannot always, and you got it very well, it's not very easy for you to amend, adjust, affect the benefit side, because the benefits are defined in the law. What you're entitled to, at what rate you're entitled to it, for how long you're entitled to it. So there is need for you to, I mean, you can always choose if things are that bad that you cannot afford to maintain those benefits at that level. At some point, you may have to look at how you adjust the benefit downwards, but that's not going to be very palatable. But you have to also seek to address the financing side. And although it may not be a popular move, it is something that is necessary to ensure the sustainability of the fund. And that is why in 2012, we began the process of reforming, increasing the pensionable age. All along it had been 60 years, it is now 65 years, because from 2012 up to this year, it was increasing by 6 months every year. so that from this year, people are qualifying for their pension at 65, meaning that they can work until they become 65 when they will draw their pension. And we also we had to increase contributions we need to get a 5% increase. And we felt as management that you could not impose too stringent a level of increase on the population. So we settled for a 0.25% increase on an annual basis. A very small percentage increase that is not making the dent that we expect it to make, but an increase that we will realize over time, nonetheless, without being too burdensome on the contributors.
Mr. Etienne, so the money that's received, right? I mean, a few of us
receive where?
Time value.
Receive
from contributions, right?
Okay.
The money that's received from contributions, right? You know, inflation, time value of money, all of those things, factoring that in. Is that money invested anywhere, and you know, and how is that managed? Okay,
remember I said the contributions we receive is for free purpose. We have to do free things with the contributions. We have to pay benefits because our main reason for existing is to collect the contributions and to pay benefits when people are in need. That is our fundamental purpose. But to do that, to be able to collect the contributions, record it, process the benefits, pay the benefits, you need people, you need infrastructure. So the cost of administering doing that is to be met from the contributions. And if you have surplus that you do not need for those things, you have to invest. But at the moment, in fact, for maybe the last 7 or 8 years, our benefit payouts on an annual basis have exceeded our contribution collections. But in the earlier years, because the system was young and new, you had more people working and contributing, fewer people in receipt of pension. So you were able to generate reserves. You had extra money that you could invest, and you still have those investments there. But on an annual basis now, we have to be relying upon some level of investment return to subsidize payment of benefits currently, because more and more people are coming of age to get their pensions, and you have fewer and fewer people working to support those payments. So, and the pensions also have to be indexed as well. You made the point about inflation. When you receive a pension 5 years ago, you were able to do a certain amount of things with that pension. Over time, that value is eroded by inflation. So every 3 years, we provide some level of inflationary increase. It doesn't restore the full value, but we provide some level of adjustment to account for inflation on the people's pensions. They call that indexing of the wages, indexing of the benefits and all of that. So while we're seeking to increase financing, we also have to maintain the relevance of the benefits that we are paying. And so benefits are adjusted as we go along. Improvements are being made to the benefit side because you want to make it relevant, meaningful, useful to the contributors, that they can know that what they are promised at the end of the day will make sense to them.
In terms of the retirement age for Social Security is 65. Is that the same?
Actually, it should be called pensionable and not retirement, because somebody can retire at any point in time, at any age. But retirement from a job does not give rise to you accessing that age pension, because age pension becomes due to a person when they attain the age that the law says they become pensionable. And it says pensionable because until you become pensionable, it means you are employable, right? If we were in your country where you are, and I am between 60 and 65, and somebody refuses me a job because I'm above 60, we could take action on the grounds of discrimination because of my age, right? Not true? Right. So I think the definition of the age at which somebody qualifies for pension in Dominica has been pensionable means until you get to that age, you are employable, you can still work. And that's why they increased the age so that people could work 5 additional years, wait 5 longer years before they get their pension, pay 5 additional years of contribution, get 5% higher pension when they retire and all of that. So there is supposed to be that level of balance as it were, and you also have to ensure that there is what we refer to as intergenerational equity, because you have earlier generations having received generous benefit provisions. They got high rates of pension without having contributed for long. And you have me and your parents and other people after us who now have to work longer, contribute for more, and we probably have to end up getting pension for a shorter period of time. So you have to allow different generations of contributors to sort of support the functioning of the system so that current generations will get their share, but future generations, even yet unborn, will be able to get their share when their time comes as well.
So how is the DSS audited, and how often are you guys audited?
Well, we have to be audited on an annual basis, and our financial statements or annual reports have to be tabled in Parliament, made before Parliament, that it becomes a public document. So our financial year runs from January to December, and by March, April of the following year, our accounts have to be audited, and the annual report is published with not just the financials, but information about the operations, what happened, what level of benefit we paid, how many people got registered, and all those kinds of things, how many people were contributing in the year. And that collated report is sent to Parliament, to the Minister responsible for Social Security, who happens to be the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, and he would make a statement in the House. I lay before this Honorable House the Social Security report, annual report for the year, whatever. And once he does that, everybody, all the members of Parliament will have a copy. So once he makes that pronouncement in the House, it is deemed to be a public document. Anybody can have access to it at that point in time.
So public audit. Who does the audit?
Who does the audit?
Yeah.
An external audit firm. For the last few years, it has been done by KPB, Chartered Accountants in Dominica. And we do not have many auditing firms in Dominica, and those external firms, they can be very costly. But so is audit firms in Dominica that has traditionally audited Social Security accounts for the last several years. I think we attempted to get regional input, to get regional people to tender, but the cost was out of the way. So we didn't get a permission to engage the external auditors from outside of Dominica, because a lot of what we do has to be endorsed or sanctioned by our minister.
You know, one of the things that you mentioned is that the contributions you're getting is not enough for the payouts, right? As of now. And one of the things that I keep hearing, even in the US, is that Social Security is going to run out of money. Right? It's going to run out of money.
Okay.
Right. So is that something that is a legit concern in Dominica in terms of Social Security running out of money? And if there are any studies that have been done, is that something that you guys have looked at?
It can be a concern, but people, you see, it ought not to get to that stage because of that 3-year actuarial evaluation that has to be done. Because when the actuary comes and does the evaluation, the actuary makes projections of what is likely to happen, recommendations to push the system forward for the next 60-year horizon. So if the actuary comes and does the assessment and says that we need to increase pension age, we need to increase contribution, we need to freeze whatever, we need to do this, that, and the other, we hit those recommendations, make those changes, the system should continue for the next 60-year horizon. Now, each time it doesn't do it for 60 years, it takes it from, so when it comes in, the actuary comes in the next 3 years, the last 3 years will drop out of the period and we'll add 3 years going forward, and we'll say exactly how long the system is expected to continue. If we fail to take action on those recommendations, you can get to a situation where the system might come to near collapse, or if it doesn't, or for it not to collapse, you have to end up taking such drastic measures to ensure it doesn't collapse that it will be unpalatable for people. And that is why it's useful to make those changes gradually over time than to make drastic changes all of a sudden, all at once.
So how are distributions calculated? Like how much money does somebody get when they become, of pensionable age? How is that calculated?
Okay. All the benefits have qualifying conditions. You have to pay a certain number of contributions for you to qualify. For the pension that you qualify for when you retire, when you become pensionable, you qualify for between 30% and 60% of your average annual income during the best 10 of the last 15 years of contributions. So you start working in your late teens, in your early 20s, and you work until 65. Obviously, what you earned when you started working will be very small in relation to what you earn when you become pensionable. for the average person, right? Because you expect your earnings to be higher just prior to retirement. So we're looking at the last 15 years during which you paid contributions or during which you were employed. Right. And we're selecting in that 15-year period the 10 years with the highest income levels. That can be the last 10 years, that can be the 10 years prior to the last 5 years, whatever. And it doesn't have to be immediately prior to being pensionable. Your last 15 years, because if you leave Dominica at 45 and stay out there and you become 65 without having contributed any further, your last 15 years would have been your 45th birthday and 15 years prior. We would take the 10 best years in that 15-year period, but for the person who works until they become pensionable, it will be the last 15 years just prior to them becoming pensionable. And we pay you that percentage between 30 and 60%. The 30% you qualify for if you paid for just 10 years, and that 30% goes up by 1% for every year above the first 10 years, to a maximum of 60%. And it is a percentage of that average earning. So it will vary for persons. You can take an example. If you take a person who earned the maximum for the best 10 of the last 15 years, a monthly salary is 7%, they contributed for 40 years. That person contributed for the 10 years at 7,000. For the number of years.
We have no little trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry. Maybe my head turned. You hear any better now?
Yes. Yep.
So I was saying that similar person.
Oh, we still out to you a little bit.
Still hearing you a little.
You are?
No.
I'm not sure what happened.
Hello?
Hello, I'm here.
Okay, yeah, you're perfect when you right where you are there. Perfect.
Okay, all right. I'm saying assuming a person earns $7,000, the maximum salary on which contributions are paid, and they earn that for 10 years in their last 15 years, and they worked for 40 years from the time they were in their 20s to the time they get to 65, they qualify for maximum of 60%. That person would receive a monthly pension of $4,200, 60% of $7,000. A person whose earnings was $1,000 would receive 60% of $1,000. That would be $600 a month. So the percentage is the same across the board, but the level of the earnings on which the person paid contributions will determine what is the value of the pension that they actually receive in terms of the dollar amount.
So one thing, I just want to piggyback on one thing you said. Sure. If you leave Dominica at 45, let's say, and you mentioned earlier that people can voluntarily.
Right, good point. Good point. Yes.
So you're still able, even if you're not in Dominica, you mentioned the diaspora.
Correct.
How would that be set up? Like, how can somebody go ahead and get that set up to be done?
Okay, so for people who left having made some contributions, it is absolutely useful if they can continue to make those contributions to augment what they would have left what they would have had there when they left. Because as I said, you get a higher percentage of your income as your pension the longer you contribute for. So some people might have left Dominica without having contributed for the minimum 10 years that you need to get a pension. If they make those voluntary contributions, they can in fact increase their accumulated contributions to access a pension. Or if they had a pension already, they would give them a higher pension at the end of the day. So it can enable them to both qualify if they did not qualify previously, as well as to receive a much higher pension. It used to be initially that for a person to do that, they would have to be engaged in Dominica for work for pay for at least 3 years prior to migrating. But in 2014, the law was amended to make that possible for anybody to come in at any point in time. Once they are not yet close to pensionable age, they can come in at any time, even without having worked previously. And all they have to do is complete an application form, and make a determination of how much income they want to cover, or put another way, how much contributions they want to pay. And then we work with them, and they can make the payment through direct bank-to-bank transfer. They can send it through the money agencies, Western Union, MoneyGram. They can send it to a relative to make those payments for them. Or they can authorize their bank in Dominica to just send the money to us on a monthly basis, or however often they want to do it, or even have the money sent from where they are to our bank in Dominica. We provide them with our banking information that they can do that.
So if somebody contributes more that decides to contribute more than the 6%, do
No,
more
it's not possible for them to contribute more. The percentage is fixed.
okay.
Every year, it will be what it is for the year. You can contribute more if your earnings are more, because you contribute a percentage of your earnings up to $7,000. So you can have multiple jobs. You can work more than one place, and you might earn cumulatively $15,000 from all the jobs you're doing. You can only contribute on up to $7,000. So although each employer will have to pay contributions on whatever they're paying you, as an individual, the total earnings you can pay contributions on $7,000. So if you pay from your three different employers on earnings in excess of $7,000, we have to refund you the excess above the $7,000. But you can certainly pay on earnings up to $7,000 from your different employments, and we're trying to see if we can get people to pay dually, both as a self-employed person as an employee, if the person is in that situation where you have a regular job where your employer pays for you, but you're doing something on the side where you earn income as well, and you can augment your income by paying on your self-employed income as well. But the law has not yet been amended to make that possible. It's something that we've earnestly working towards doing, because there are people in Dominica who are in that situation. They get in some level of income stipend. People like who do registering, the registering officers for elections, even members of the Music Lovers Government Band, they get a small allowance monthly from government. And because salary employee status takes precedence over self-employed status, because it is easier for everybody, because your employer knows how much they're paying you, they deduct from you, they pay for you, as opposed to self-employed. You have to remember, you have to be disciplined. The employee status takes precedence over the self-employed status. And so these people are disadvantaged, because whereas they're making more money in their self-employment, they are only allowed to contribute on whatever little thing they get from government for the engagement that they're doing for government. So we've seen the need for us to do that, but we have not gotten the green light to do it with the amendment of the law to allow that to happen.
What happens if the employer collects the Social Security but doesn't pay to the Social Security? What happens then?
As happens once the information comes to us, we have authority to, we sort of write to the employer first of all and say, it has come to attention that you had people working for you, these were the wages, and they actually have to acknowledge the debt. And if they acknowledge the debt, it means they know they have to pay the debt. And if the time passes and they do not make arrangement to pay, we can take them to court. The court can send them to prison, and when they come out from business, they still have to pay this, because these are statutory legal deductions that are to be made. It is, as you call, sacrosanct. You cannot take somebody's money for the purpose of providing them with protection and not pay it. If you do that, you are in fact stealing the person's money, because you take it out from their salary for the purpose of paying it to Social Security on their behalf. And when you fail to do that, what you've done in effect is pocketing their money. And so the law will frown on you for doing that.
But even then, the responsibility is still on the employee to keep up with those happenings.
By all means, and we encourage them to check to make sure, because it have people in very high positions. They don't know a clue about what Social Security is about. They just know the money coming from their paycheck. Sometimes they well vexed that it is coming and they're not checking.
They need to watch tonight. They need to watch the show tonight.
It's not that the employer sometimes deliberately do not do it. It happens even to the best of. Government is the largest employer in Dominica. Government does a good job at paying contribution, but sometimes a person or two falls through the crack. And in all fairness to government, once it comes to attention, we inform them, they take steps to pay it. Okay, but it have other people that they say, but they take it out of my pay. Look at my pay slip. Yes, your pay slip is showing it, but sometimes the money doesn't actually reach us. And when that happens, once it comes to attention, we will take steps to recover the money. But it is better if the employee checks from time to time, put us on guard that this employer is engaging me, deducting money from me. I just want to know that they're paying it. And if it is not being paid, the mere inquiry that the employee makes gives us enough information for us to monitor and pursue the employer to recover the amounts.
So if you never worked in Dominica, let's say you moved to the US at 15 per se, are you able to still get? I mean, you have a Dominican passport, right? You were born there. Are you able to still contribute to Social Security in Dominica? Is that possible?
Yes, you are Dominican, right? But you said you sold your flag, no? You sell your passport? No, we still deem you Dominican because you are native-born Dominican. You may have a second citizenship wherever you're living, but because you were born in Dominica, you can make contributions. Because especially if you have interest in Dominica, to come back at some point, and Dominica being what it is, how it is, most people who have a connection with Dominica will want at some point to come back, because yes, they don't mind the hustle and the bustle, make the money, but at some point they want to come enjoy it and relax in Dominica with all that Dominica has to offer. So those persons have the option to do it. So the only caveat on that is if Dominica has what we call reciprocity with another country's social security, those persons working in those countries cannot pay voluntarily, because at the end of the day, we will take account of their contributions in the country where they are. And that is, we have a CARICOM agreement on social security among the CARICOM member countries. There is some form of reciprocity between Dominica and Canada, but not the US, the UK, and other places like that. So Dominicans living anywhere else outside of CARICOM and possibly Canada can in fact pay voluntarily to the system and therefore be able to access a pension down the road. So
there was talk of harmonizing the social security in the OECS at least. Has there been any progress on that? Is that, what is the status of that? As you spoke of CARICOM. And well,
at the CARICOM level, they've pretty much put a system in place where the long-term benefits, the pensions, people can benefit from their total participation across CARICOM in retirement. When they retire, they can benefit from all the other places where they would have made some contribution. And the way it works is that if you contribute long enough one place, say in Dominica, you would automatically qualify for a pension in Dominica, independent of anywhere else. And where that happens, anywhere else in CARICOM you would have worked, they would have to pay you a piece of a pension. That would represent a proportion of what you would have qualified for if you had made all your contributions there. And the beauty of it is, where you did not work long enough, because you were such a rolling stone that gathered nowhere, that when you reach retirement, if you would look at all of the places where you bounced, where you stopped for a while, worked, made some contributions, moved on, and totalize, bring together the contributions that you would have made in all of the countries to allow you to qualify. And there too, when that happens, each of us have to pay you a proportionate amount of the pension that you would qualify for based on your total contributions across CARICOM, but it would be in proportion to the number that you made in Dominica versus the number you made in Barbados, Antigua, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, as the case may be. So the beauty of it is that before that program, that agreement came into force, you worked in these several places, you did not contribute long enough to qualify for a pension anywhere, each of them would have paid you a lump sum amount that would not be beneficial to you. As I said, the lump sum amount would be blown away in quick time and nothing else to come in. But once you contributed cumulatively for the number of years that you need to qualify in one place, all of the others would have to pay you something. So as opposed to getting just a lump sum from everybody, you get a small piece of a pension, but the pension you will get it until you die. And that is always better for someone than to just get a lump sum.
Are pensions the only benefit that the DSS pays out?
No. We actually pay all now, so while I'm at work, in the short term, we have short-term benefits, sickness. So if I were to fall sick for a week, 2 weeks in the month, a whole month, 3 months, depending on what the situation is, and I am not able to go to work because of that illness, my employer will not pay me my full salary. They should not be required to pay my full salary, because if I was getting paid for not working, if I were being paid for not working, there would be no reason, no incentive for me to go to work. Right? So when I do not work, my employer will not pay me my full salary. But because I'm sick and couldn't go to work, it does mean my commitments are less. So the system is going to replace for me 60% of my salary that I cannot enjoy from my employer because I was not able to go to work for the period. And the employer pays me 40%, 60 and 40 is 100. So all things being equal, I should still be, relatively speaking, in the same position as I would have been had I worked for the entire month. If you have a young woman who is pregnant, she has to stop work at some point to have a child. and to spend some time bonding and nursing that child before she's able to go back to work. Again, for the period that she's abstaining from work for the purpose of having the child and nursing and bonding, she will not receive her full salary from her employer. We replace for her 60% of her earnings for the 12-week period that she's required to be out there bonding and nursing with that child. If somebody sustains an injury on the job or they contract a disease at work, while they're at work, they get benefit. It will be like sickness. They get 60% of their income for the period that they are incapacitated. And if somebody becomes too sick to work before becoming pensionable, they can get what we refer to as invalidity benefit for as long as they remain so invalid. When you become pensionable, you get your age pension that you get for the rest of your life. Upon your death, there is a funeral grant that is paid to assist the person who is responsible for your burial to bury you. And if you leave dependents behind, a spouse, children under the age of 21 who are unmarried, unemployed, and at school, those children can get benefits. Or if you die leaving no spouse, no children behind, but there was a parent or grandparent above the age of 60 who you were responsible for, who you were supporting, that parent or grandparent will receive half of the benefit that you were enjoying if you were getting it already, or the benefit you would have enjoyed if you had not died, but in fact you were around to receive it. So
what about early retirement? How does that factor into Social Security and your payouts?
okay. Early retirement
Can you hear you?
everybody is now 65. And some people are required to stop working at 60 because that is the age at which Social Security paid pensions traditionally. But because of the demographic changes that I said the actuary had to make recommendations, it was necessary to increase the age that is now at 65 and to bring it more in line with what happens generally everywhere else. In every other part of the world, including the Caribbean, if there are 2 or 3 other countries that are paying pensions at less than 65, they are in fact starting to move to increase towards 65. Okay, but when that increase was effected, a provision was made in the law to allow someone to opt for pension anytime between 60 and 65. The only thing is when they do that, they're going to receive a modified pension, a reduced pension, because effectively what is happening is that when you take it earlier than you should rightfully have gotten it, at the end of your life, you're going to have received it for a period longer than you should have received it, right? So if you should get at 65 and you take it at 60, you're taking it 5 years earlier. So by the time you die, at whatever age you die, you would have received it 5 years longer than you rightfully should have. And so the reduction factor that is applied of 0.5% per month or 6% per year equates the pension that you take in earlier to what you would have gotten had you waited to get it at the full age. But that provision is a person can opt for it. But now that the age is 65, you have to kind of gauge at what point you want to take it, because the earlier you take it, the higher the reduction you have to suffer. Whereas the longer you wait, the more of your full pension you'll be able to enjoy at the end of the day. But the provision is there for people to take reduced pension prior to becoming pensionable.
Are there any plans for the Social Security to like expand into maybe like a national health insurance or anything along those lines?
Okay. Social Security may not expand in that sense. National health insurance is another separate program similar to Social Security. But what the expectation is, because of the Social Security mechanism infrastructure of collecting contributions, making payments, any attempt by Dominica to implement a national health insurance program, Social Security might be the vehicle that's going to administer that program. So it may not be an addition to our package of benefits, but it might be a program separate that we would have to administer, collect the contributions, keep the records, make the payments. And in fact, in 2017, a national health insurance pilot program was introduced by government that we are administering for them. But it was for just young mothers and children under the age of 3, but the age of the children has been increased to 16, children who are at school, because the compulsory school age is 16. You have to be at school until 16. So a child who is under 16 who is sick and has to access medical care locally, regionally, whatever, particularly if it's not available at our medical facilities here, that pilot insurance program is supposed to provide assistance to that child or that mother accessing healthcare outside of Dominica. So yes, we are well placed to administer a program like that, but it may not be an addition to the package of benefits that we offer. It will be a separate program that will be administered. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in terms of, I keep getting feedback. In terms of Dominica and retirement, right? Is Social Security the only I guess it's maybe one of the biggest retirement plans I guess you have in Dominica? Are there other things like I know here?
Well, it represents the main pillar. I would like to call it the main pillar of retirement income for Dominicans. And Social Security, incidentally, is something that is found in every civilized society. And it is a society's way of socially providing for its citizens, so that in events of hardship that are brought about by certain things that they're exposed to in life, they have access to what we call a safety net, and it is part of what is referred to as social protection that society makes provisions for to socially protect its citizens against certain contingencies that will affect them in their lifetime. So you have a few organizations, institutions that may have private pension arrangements for their staff, for their workers, but that is in addition to what Social Security provides. Social Security provides a basic level of protection to all those Dominicans who are participating in it, as opposed to and that's why it is mandatory to, as opposed to the private schemes like the member retirement accounts, the private insurances, the other investments, because these are reserved for a privileged few who can afford to make those additional investments. But the Social Security provides that basic level of protection for all of the population who participate in it.
So is there any difference between how it's set up for the public sector versus the private sector?
In what sense?
On the contribution sense,
no.
Between how government workers contribute and how
the only thing is government as an employer contributes 0.25% less than private sector employers, because private sector employers are contributing 0.25% extra to the redundancy fund that we are administering on behalf of the Ministry of Labor. And that fund was established, so that Social Security fund is established as part of the labor laws of Dominica, the protection of employment law, that employers who pay to that fund, if and when they make employees redundant and pay them severance pay, they can receive a rebate from the redundancy fund to sort of cushion the impact of the severance payment to their workers when they make them redundant. So that is what it is. It's not part of the Social Security program, but because of the mechanism again, we collect that extra 0.25% from those employers in the private sector to give them some level of rebate when they make employees redundant and pay them severance pay.
Is that mandatory? Mandatory?
It is. It's just a few categories of workers, like government workers for sure, domestic workers. You have longshoremen, stevedores on the port, and persons who have the ability and authority to hire and fire employees, as well as members of the immediate family of the owner of the business. Those are the people who are exempt from protection of employment, because if you work in those areas there, your employment is not protected in law, so to speak. So if you lose your job tomorrow, nobody owes you anything. But the other areas, all the other areas except government, and those I just identified, they contribute to the redundancy fund, so they are protected under the Protection of Employment Act. And if they are made redundant for one reason or another, in the case of COVID, after Hurricane Maria, an organization is downsizing, streamlining its operations, and they have to make certain positions redundant, those persons will be paid severance pay, and the employers would receive a rebate from the fund. Also, if the employers who are making the employees redundant are unable to make that severance payment, the employees can apply directly to the fund, and the fund will pay them and seek to recover the payment from the employer. Now, where the fund makes the payment directly to the employees who are made redundant, the employer is not entitled to the rebate, but where he pays the severance pay, they get the rebate from the fund.
And in terms of beneficiaries, so if you leave people behind over 21, they don't get anything. So that money just goes back into the fund.
Let me say that if the children are over 21, for them to get it, they have to be deemed invalid. You know, children who are physically or mentally challenged, never left the house, never went to school, have no earning ability. Irrespective of the child's age, the child will be able to get the survivor's benefit. But if the children are normal children, and at the moment it is up to age 21, later on it might go up to 25, because if children are at school up to that point, it might go up to that age. But recognize that once the children become independent, once you start working for yourself, you're no longer dependent on your parents. You are now independent of your parents. You are supposed to be contributing yourself into the program so that you can get benefits should something happen to you. Important to note that the contributions being paid by workers is not for anybody else, but for their own benefit. We only give children, spouses, parents access to benefit where the contributing person who would have been deemed the breadwinner of the family might have died and left behind people who cannot fend for themselves. So you give those persons whom they live in access to a benefit by virtue of their contributions. But it is not for anybody else. So people always ask that question. The contributions you're making is not for anybody else, but for yourself. If you're not there to enjoy it and you leave dependents behind, they will get something. But if you leave no dependents behind, it stays in the system for the benefit of the other people who are participants in the system. Because, truth be told, if the reverse happened, you live long, like Mr. Kazimi, who did not contribute very long, we have to continue paying you forever and ever. So there is not, in the true sense of the word, you can't say my money. You paid contributions, yes, and the important thing is that you paid contributions. And I like to liken the pooling thing for a swimming pool that people can help to create by carrying water from the river, from the sea to full and open space to create a swimming pool. Now, when you carry the water and you pour it in this space to fill up this space, can you differentiate one person's bucket of water from different persons? Can you do that? No. But all of us would have carried water to create the pool. And somebody would have known who contributed to creating the pool. The gatekeeper who is keeping tabs of who come in and making several trips to and from the river or to the sea to pour the water there, knows exactly what the people who created the pool. Those persons will be able to come and swim when they need to. But I can't differentiate how much water I put there. I may not make a mental note I carried 100 buckets of water, but you can't separate my 100 buckets from Queen's or from Rajiv's or anybody else's. So the pool is such that all of us creating it, all of us in it together, and it is only those of us who are affected. Let's say in the same analogy of the pool, those of us who are under the shadow of the summer, that we need to go and refresh ourselves by swimming. We go there, but the others who are okay because whatever, they have no need to come and swim yet. But when their time comes, they will be allowed to swim because they have to create the pool. And we're not concerned about you getting exactly what you put in. The important thing is that you made the contributions when you had to, and now that you find yourself in a particular situation, it is your time to receive your benefit, no matter what. And it is the contributions that you would have made that will give you access to the benefit. If you fail to make the number of contributions, unfortunately, you may not be able to access the benefit. But once you meet the conditions, it has to be paid to you, no questions asked, and no limit to how much you will receive at the end of the day. Because the important thing is not how much, it's not a savings account you had, and we keep in tab, you paid 30,000 and we give you interest on it. And when you use that 30,000 plus the interest, it's finished. No. There is no cancel stamp. As long as you live, you will get it. And when you die, if you leave people behind, they will get it too. But at what point do you determine that you've gotten all of your money back? We're not concerned about you getting all of your money back. We're concerned about you having made those contributions when you had to. Now that you need to draw your benefit, you get it for as long as you need to get it. It is not uncommon for people to receive how many times over. There was a man in Portsmouth that used to fuss and fight. When are we going to change a little, increase a little pittance only giving me there? We went to Portsmouth for some meeting. Somebody was like, by the time we were selling those changes, and we were a little apprehensive about him coming and spew any negative vibes to make it difficult for us to get the green light for us to do what we had to do. And my boss tells us, don't you worry, just give me a printout of the man's benefit history to date. That would have been 2006. And we didn't know the man, but when we got to Portsmouth, the director asked somebody from the place, can you point me to Mr. George, please? And they took her to the man. And she said to the man, "So I understand you have a bone to pick with us." And he said, "I just don't want to give me that because he was getting $57 a week." And she said, "Okay, I understand what you're saying. All of us could do it more if we could have it. But you know what? Look at your benefit history. This is how much you paid to Social Security when you were working, a percentage of his salary. This is how much you've earned during your entire working life, 100% of his salary. This is how much we've paid you as your pension to date." And at that time in 2006, the man's pension he had gotten from Social Security had already surpassed his total salary he enjoyed during his entire working life.
Wow. And
he was still, and it's not, if he died 5 or 6 years ago, it's not long time ago he died. The man said to my boss, "You know what, ma'am? I need to speak to these people." And the same reaction I had at that time, I have it every time I relate that story. I got goosebumps because what he said, he said, "You all people have been making a fuss. And this woman put me to shame, literally put me to shame because I did force it, and she showed me that I have got more from the system that I actually worked for in my entire working life. And I still enjoyed it." Let me tell you something. If they need to do what they want to do now for you to enjoy what I'm enjoying today, just give them the green light to do it. And without exaggerating, the meeting ended and everybody said, "Okay, in that case, go ahead and increase the age, increase the contribution, we do this, do that." So, I mean, it have people that really probably contribute and get little from it, but the vast majority of people get much more from it. In fact, our experience is that within 2 years of somebody qualifying for a pension, they get back every dollar that they ever paid in. Because remember, they get in at a higher rate than they actually paid in. Some people contribute and get nothing because if they didn't live to enjoy it, they leave nobody behind, then there is nothing to be had. But most people get far more out of it than they actually put in.
And what's the starting to wrap up now? We don't want to keep you too long. What's the minimum amount of time you need to contribute? Well, it's not time, it's contributions.
Well, it can be in terms of time as well as number. We talk of time in terms of years, we talk of number in terms of every year a person contributes for we say they have 52 or 53 contribution weeks. So 500 weeks, that is roughly 10 years of contribution is what you need to qualify for an age pension. And that is what you need. And some people say, "Well, I have enough, I have 500 contribution in the system, I can stop." That's not the intention, because 500 contribution is just minimum pension, just the key that opens the door for you to get a pension. The value of the pension will be better based on the number of years after these first 10 years that you contribute for.
Okay. So, Mr. Etienne, we really, really appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a very informative session. You know, we definitely gonna make this available for people to go back to watch, right? We're gonna have it on YouTube.
Okay.
I think Mr. Etienne also said that, you know, you guys are gonna be posting it on the Social Security page as well.
Facebook, I'd like to do that. Yes, please.
Yep. Yeah, we will get that. We'll get that to you. But guys, you know, this is part of the reason we started the show, right? This type of information that when I was growing up, I didn't know any of this stuff, right?
No.
So it's really, really good stuff for us to learn. It really can translate or transfer to not just Dominica, right? If you live anywhere else that has a sort of social security system.
And everywhere has it. And another thing that we experience is that when we interface with the public on the radio, a lot of people, expats who return from England, the UK, the US, Canada, and they get in their pension from the social security system. They tell people you have to pay a contribution for you to get that. So it's not something that is just in Dominica. And the unfortunate thing is that our population is small. But all our people need that protection.
Yep.
And in fact, ILO, the International Labour Organization, is now seeing social security as a fundamental human right, you know. It's not something that's available to the privileged few. It's something that everybody needs, because when that time comes and you find yourself in hardship where you cannot earn income again and you have to leave, you have to maintain your livelihood, you need to have access to an income. And that is what social security, that is what some of them call it national insurance, some call it social insurance. That is what that system is meant to provide to people.
Yes, man. It's been really great, you know, for you to give, because even a lot of the comments I'm getting right now is great session. You know, it's a lot of information. So guys, it's gonna be available. If it was too much to swallow in one sitting, you guys can go back, pause, rewind, watch it again. But it will be available on YouTube over the next couple of days.
Okay.
We just want to make a couple announcements before we close.
Mhm.
One, we have our merchandise store. We posted that in the chat. And it's pinned in the chat. You guys can check it out if you guys want to support the show. We're gonna have on in the next 2 weeks, we're gonna have a young lady on by the name of Stasha. She's an artist. She's part of Signal Band. She's an independent artist. And yes, they will be back for that one if you guys missing him. But with that said, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. We want to thank Mr. Etienne for coming on, and have a good night, everybody.
Gentlemen, the pleasure has been mine. Let me tell you, if you figure you need to repeat this, have a follow-up, feel free, because we welcome any opportunity to interface with the public to make sure they understand and appreciate what we do, so that we can actually derive voluntary compliance, voluntary participation by person, because what we do is very important. And I have told myself, I've committed myself to making sure that as long as I live, I will try my best to encourage people to make sure they come on board, that they can get the benefit, because it hurts our heart when people come to us and say, but I was working this all my life, and at retirement, there is not a pension for them because somebody failed to do what they had to do when they had to do it. So
Right.
people who are close to me in my community, once I know they're working for themselves, I talk to them, I encourage them, do that for me, please. Because I don't want you to be waiting for you to ask me for a bed tomorrow. I mean, I will get, but you don't want to depend on
It's true.
Stretching a hand to you. You want your independence and your dignity, which Social Security give. It may be small, it may be a small pension, but at least you will have that
something
on independently. So if you figure you need to have a follow-up session, feel free to, invite me.
Right.
No problem.
We definitely appreciate it, man.